The city never truly slept. From the 32nd floor of the Grant Tower, neon lights flickered against the glass walls, streaking Alexander Grant's reflection as he stood in the elevator. His tie hung loose around his neck, his jaw set in a grim line that had become too familiar. Another 12-hour day at the helm of his corporation, another night spent rushing home not to collapse into bed, but to sit by his mother's side. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime. He stepped into the marble-floored penthouse, where the scent of lavender oil drifted faintly through the air. His mother insisted on keeping the place calm and warm, even though she spent most of her time in the guest suite turned into a makeshift recovery room. But the first sound that reached him wasn't the gentle hum of his mother's favorite classical playlist. It was a sharp, irritated voice carrying through the air. "Alexander isn't here again," Vanessa Kingsley complained, her tone loud enough to travel down the corridor. "Do you see what I mean, Margaret? He spends every waking second thinking about you, running back and forth to hospitals, rearranging his entire life just to hover around. And what about me? I'm supposed to be his girlfriend, his priority." Alexander slowed, his briefcase heavy in his hand. He recognized that voice all too well, the voice that once charmed him, once felt like excitement wrapped in silk. Now it grated. He walked softly, letting the shadows hide his presence. Inside the softly lit sitting room, Margaret Grant sat propped against embroidered cushions, her frail hands folded neatly in her lap. Even in sickness there was dignity in her posture, a quiet strength in her pale face. Her silver hair framed her features like a crown, though fatigue pulled at her eyes. Opposite her sat Vanessa, a striking woman, tall and sharp-boned, dressed in a glittering cocktail dress as if she'd just left another society gala. Diamonds sparkled at her wrists, but there was no warmth in her gaze. "I don't want to sound cruel," Vanessa continued, her voice rising. "But this has gone on long enough. How many more hospital runs? How many more late-night calls? You're not getting better, Margaret. You're just dragging him down with you. He's exhausted." "I'm exhausted. Honestly, sometimes I wish—" She caught herself, lips pressing into a thin line, but the words were already halfway out. Margaret flinched slightly, though she said nothing. Alexander's chest tightened. He stepped closer, silent, his shoes making no sound on the Persian rug. Vanessa leaned forward, lowering her voice, but not enough to hide the venom. "Sometimes I wish you'd just go already. Then Alexander could finally live for himself. For us." The room froze. Margaret's fingers twitched against her lap, her eyes glistening but dry. She would never dignify such cruelty with tears in front of this woman. Alexander felt the words like a physical blow, hot anger roaring to life in his chest. For a moment, his vision blurred, but years of boardroom discipline locked him still, muscles rigid. He inhaled slowly, deliberately. He could not erupt here, not when his mother was the target, not when Vanessa would twist any outburst into a performance. He retreated half a step into the shadow of the doorway, and then, as if on cue, Vanessa noticed him. "Alexander." Her tone flipped in an instant, syrupy sweet, her posture straightening as she rose gracefully to her feet. "Darling, you're home early. I was just keeping your mother company. Poor thing, she's been looking so tired. I was telling her how much I admire her strength." Margaret said nothing. Her silence was her shield. Alexander set his briefcase down slowly, masking the storm beneath his calm exterior. "I see." His voice was steady, measured, as if he had indeed walked in on nothing but polite conversation. Vanessa crossed the room, heels clicking against the polished floor. She slipped her arm around his, pressing her cheek lightly against his shoulder. "You work too hard. We hardly see each other anymore. I was just reminding your mother that you can't always split yourself in two." Her words burned. Alexander gave a faint smile, though his eyes didn't meet hers. "We'll talk later," he said quietly. "For now, let my mother rest." Vanessa pouted, but she obeyed, pressing a quick kiss to his cheek before sweeping out of the room with the rustle of silk and perfume. When the door shut, the silence that followed was heavy. Alexander moved to his mother's side immediately, kneeling beside her chair. He took her hand gently, his thumb brushing over her cool skin. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for letting her speak to you at all." Margaret shook her head faintly, managing a small smile. "It isn't your fault, Alex. The world shows its colors in time. You see them now." His throat tightened. "I should have seen them sooner." "You are loyal," she said, her voice soft, each word careful. "That is your strength, my son. But loyalty can blind us to truth." Alexander bowed his head against her hand, anger and shame warring inside him. He thought of the woman he had once believed would be his partner, beautiful, ambitious, admired by society. And yet, under the gloss, there was no heart, no compassion. That night, after settling his mother into bed and checking her medications, Alexander stood alone by the wide glass windows overlooking the city. Lights glittered below like 1,000 lies, bright but empty. He thought of Vanessa's words, of the venom in her voice. He thought of his mother's steady strength enduring cruelty with grace, and he thought of his own silence, the mask he had chosen in that moment, a vow formed quietly in his chest. Never again would he allow anyone, no matter how beautiful, no matter how admired, to dishonor his mother under his roof. Never again would he mistake glamour for love. The cracks in his perfect life had split wide open, and now he could no longer pretend not to see them. The following week moved like a storm. Margaret's health faltered again, forcing another trip to the hospital. Vanessa complained incessantly about the sterile smell of the place, the hours wasted, the depressing atmosphere. Each complaint chipped further at the bond between her and Alexander. One evening, as Alexander sat in the hospital corridor filling out forms, Vanessa stormed out of the room in a huff. "She won't even talk to me," she snapped, adjusting her designer coat. "I try, but she just stares. Honestly, Alex, she doesn't like me, and I'm starting not to like her either. I didn't sign up for this endless cycle." Alexander looked up slowly, his pen still poised above the paper. "You didn't sign up for me to care for my mother?" "I signed up for a relationship," she retorted, tossing her hair. "For romance, dinners, travel. Not for being third wheel to a sick old woman." The words cut, but this time, Alexander did not hide his reaction. His eyes, dark and cold, locked onto hers with a force that silenced her. "Go home, Vanessa," he said flatly. "I'll call you when I'm free." She blinked, startled by the dismissal, then scoffed. "Fine. Do whatever you want." She turned on her heel and left, her perfume lingering long after she disappeared down the corridor. Alone again, Alexander leaned back against the wall, exhaustion seeping into his bones. His world, once orderly and gilded, now felt brittle. He thought of how fragile his mother had become, how merciless Vanessa's words still echoed in his mind. He hadn't realized until now how lonely he truly was. And yet, somewhere down the hall, a soft laugh floated faintly, a sound that didn't belong to his mother or Vanessa. A voice warm, genuine, cutting through the sterile silence of the hospital like sunlight through rain. He didn't know yet who it belonged to, but soon that voice would change everything. Hospitals had a way of blurring time. The white walls, the endless beeping of machines, the sterile air, they swallowed day and night into one long stretch of waiting. For Alexander Grant, the routine had become second nature. Board meetings and billion-dollar deals shrank in importance compared to the hours spent sitting beside his mother's bed. Margaret had been admitted again. Her breathing was shallow, her body frail, yet she still managed to smile at her son, still found the strength to murmur encouragements when it should have been him comforting her. But this time, something was different. When Alexander arrived early one morning, expecting to find the usual rotation of nurses, he found a woman adjusting the blanket gently around Margaret's shoulders. She was speaking in a low, soothing tone, And though Alexander caught only fragments of her words, he saw the effect instantly. His mother's tense features softened, her eyes brightened with faint amusement. "And I promise you, Mrs. Grant, no matter how long this hallway feels, the other side is always brighter. We'll get there together." Margaret chuckled softly. "You have a way with words, young lady." The nurse laughed too, a sound warm and genuine. "Not really. I just believe them." Alexander stood silently in the doorway, observing. The woman was not dressed like the glamorous circles Vanessa floated in. Instead, she wore the simple navy scrubs of her profession. Her hair was neatly pulled back, her movements calm and unhurried. There was no performance in her smile, no calculation in her eyes. "Good morning," Alexander said finally, his voice deep but even. The nurse turned. She startled slightly, then offered a polite nod. "Good morning, sir." Margaret's face lit up. "Alex, this is Nurse Tracy Bernard. She's been checking on me since last night. She's different from the rest." Tracy gave a modest shrug. "I just try to make my patients comfortable." Alexander studied her a moment longer. In the past few months, he had seen countless nurses, efficient, capable, professional, but few who lingered when they didn't have to, few who spoke as if the patient were more than a chart. He stepped forward and extended his hand. "Alexander Grant." "I know," Tracy said softly, taking his hand with a firm but gentle grip. "But to me, you're Margaret's son first." Something flickered in his chest at that, an unexpected warmth. Over the next several days, Alexander noticed Tracy more and more. She wasn't always assigned directly to his mother's room, yet somehow she appeared often, checking Margaret's IV, adjusting pillows, offering a reassuring word. Sometimes she brought small things. A flower from the hospital garden, a folded paper crane she said was for good luck, a little card with a hopeful quote scribbled in her neat handwriting. Margaret cherished each one. "Look at this," Margaret said one afternoon, holding up the card with trembling fingers. "Storms make trees take deeper roots." "She's right, Alex. We'll weather this." Alexander smiled faintly, but his eyes strayed to Tracy, who was adjusting the curtain to let in sunlight. She moved with quiet efficiency, yet carried a presence that shifted the atmosphere of the room. Vanessa, by contrast, grew more restless with each visit. She complained about the hospital coffee, scrolled endlessly through her phone, and barely concealed her irritation whenever Tracy entered the room. One afternoon, as Tracy stepped out to fetch new linens, Vanessa leaned toward Alexander, lowering her voice. "She's around too much. Don't they have other patients? It's unnecessary." Alexander's jaw tightened. "She's doing her job. She's doing more than that," Vanessa said sharply. "It's like she's trying to insert herself, and you're encouraging it." He turned to face her fully, his expression cold. "What I encourage is compassion for my mother. If you can't appreciate that, perhaps you should leave." Vanessa's mouth fell open, but before she could respond, Tracy returned. She smiled politely, oblivious to the tension, and went back to work. Alexander's gaze softened the moment it landed on her. He didn't admit it to himself yet, but the contrast was already too stark to ignore. A week later, Margaret was stable enough to be discharged. As Alexander completed the paperwork, an idea formed in his mind. He found the attending physician and made a request. "My mother recovers better at home, but I want consistency in her care. There's a nurse she responds to, Tracy Bernard. I'd like her assigned for routine home visits if possible." The doctor raised a brow. "Tracy? She's dedicated, no doubt. If she's willing, we can make arrangements." By evening, the request had been granted. When Alexander told Margaret, her eyes brightened. "That young woman? Oh, Alex, she's a gift. She'll keep me on my toes." Alexander smiled. "That's what I'm counting on." Home visits became a new rhythm. Tracy arrived 3 times a week, sometimes more, always with the same cheerful energy. She checked vitals, adjusted medications, and spent time chatting with Margaret, sometimes about literature, sometimes about faith, sometimes about little nothings that made his mother laugh. More and more, Alexander found himself lingering during these visits. At first, he stayed out of obligation, watching silently as Tracy worked. But gradually, he joined their conversations, drawn into the warmth she created. One evening, as Tracy packed her bag to leave, Alexander walked her to the door. "You don't treat her like a patient," he observed. Tracy paused, meeting his gaze. "Because she's not just a patient. She's a person, a mother, a woman with a life beyond these walls. Illness doesn't erase that." Her words settled deep in his chest. He had built an empire where people often reduced each other to numbers, contracts, outcomes. But here was someone who saw differently. He found himself asking questions about her life, where she studied, what inspired her. She answered with humility, never boasting. She spoke of long nights in nursing school, of the community center where she sometimes volunteered, of the grandmother who raised her. And always, when she smiled, it wasn't the polished smile of Vanessa or the shallow flattery of his business peers. It was real. Alexander didn't know when the shift happened, but one evening he realized it. He looked forward to Tracy's visits more than anything else. Vanessa noticed. One night she confronted him after dinner. "You're distant," she accused, slamming her wine glass on the table. "Every time I come over, she's here. And you light up when she speaks. Don't think I haven't seen it." Alexander leaned back, his face calm but firm. "Vanessa, this isn't about jealousy. This is about respect. You've made it clear how you feel about my mother. I can't overlook that anymore." Her eyes widened. "You're ending things? For a nurse?" He didn't flinch. "I'm ending things because I finally see the truth. This isn't love, Vanessa. It never was." The argument ended there. She stormed out, her heels clicking like gunshots against the floor, her perfume lingering like smoke after fire. For the first time in months, Alexander felt free. Margaret's health improved steadily under Tracy's care. She regained color in her cheeks, strength in her steps. Some afternoon she even ventured into the garden, Tracy beside her, chatting as though they were old friends. One evening, Alexander returned home from work to find them sitting together on the patio, laughter ringing out over the roses. Margaret leaned against a cushion, her eyes sparkling in a way he hadn't seen in years. He stood at the doorway watching silently, a strange ache swelling in his chest. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper, something that stirred whenever Tracy smiled, whenever she looked at his mother as if she were family. In that moment, Alexander knew. He was falling in love. The city's spring came early that year. Blossoms spilled across the parks. Fresh air softened the streets, and even the sky seemed clearer than usual. For Alexander Grant, the season carried a meaning it hadn't before. Hope, renewal, and something fragile yet powerful blossoming inside him. It had been 3 months since Vanessa stormed out of his life for good. In those months, Alexander had poured his time into 2 things: stabilizing his company after a difficult quarter, and more importantly, being present with his mother as she regained her health. But through it all, one presence had remained constant: Tracy Bernard. She wasn't just Margaret's nurse anymore. She had become part of their days, part of their conversations, part of their lives. Alexander had come to know the sound of her laugh from rooms away, the rhythm of her footsteps in the hallway, the way her eyes softened whenever she looked at his mother. And though he hadn't said the words aloud yet, he knew the truth deep in his chest. He loved her. The opportunity to say something came one late afternoon. The 3 of them were on the terrace. Margaret dozed lightly in a chair, wrapped in a shawl, while Alexander and Tracy sat nearby. The sun was low, painting the sky gold. Alexander cleared his throat softly. "Tracy," he began, his voice quieter than usual. "I've been meaning to ask you something personal." Tracy turned, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "All right." He hesitated, fingers drumming lightly on the armrest. "When you're not here, when you're not looking after my mother, what makes you happy? What do you love?" Tracy tilted her head, thoughtful. "I love simple things," she said slowly. Reading on quiet mornings, cooking with my grandmother's old recipes, volunteering at the children's clinic on weekends. I guess I just love seeing people feel cared for. Alexander's lips curved faintly. That shows. Every time you walk into a room. Her cheeks flushed slightly, but she smiled. And what about you, Alexander? Beyond boardrooms and skyscrapers, what makes you happy? The question startled him. He had answers for shareholders, for journalists, for investors. But stripped bare, he found himself admitting something he hadn't realized fully until that moment. This, he said softly, glancing toward his sleeping mother. Being here, knowing she's laughing again, knowing I'm not alone in caring for her. His eyes lifted back to Tracy, knowing there are still people who choose kindness when they don't have to. For a moment, their gazes held. Something unspoken passed between them, an understanding too deep for words. But before Alexander could say more, Margaret stirred awake, smiling faintly at the sight of them. You two talk as if you've known each other forever. Tracy laughed nervously. Alexander only smiled. That night, as he lay in bed, he made his decision. He couldn't keep silent any longer. The next evening after dinner, Alexander asked Tracy to join him in the garden. The night air was cool, the roses just beginning to bloom. Lights from the city twinkled in the distance. Tracy, he began, steadying his breath. I've been thinking a lot these past months, about loyalty, about love, about what really matters. And I need to be honest with you. She looked at him, eyes wide, uncertain. I admire you, he continued. Not because of what you've done for my mother, though I'm grateful beyond words. I admire you because of who you are. Your kindness, your humility, your strength. You've changed the way I see the world. Tracy's breath caught. Alexander. He stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. I know we come from different worlds, and I know you may not see yourself the way I see you, but I can't ignore what's grown in my heart. Tracy, I'm falling in love with you. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the rustle of leaves. Tracy's eyes glistened. I don't know what to say. You're Alexander Grant. People see you as untouchable, and I'm just... Don't, he said firmly, gently taking her hand. Don't diminish yourself. You're everything I didn't know I needed, and I don't want a life without you in it. Her voice trembled. I've been afraid that I'd never belong in your world. You belong wherever you choose to stand, he said softly, and I want to stand beside you. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time, her smile came through it. Then, yes, Alexander, I care for you too, more than I meant to. Relief and joy surged through him. For the first time in years, Alexander felt whole. Their relationship grew quietly at first. Tracy remained professional in her duties with Margaret. But outside those moments, she and Alexander built something new. They shared dinners on the terrace, long walks in the park, evenings filled with laughter and stories. Margaret noticed, of course. She watched with knowing eyes, her heart swelling each time she saw the way her son looked at Tracy and the way Tracy's presence softened him. One afternoon, as Tracy prepared tea, Margaret caught Alexander alone. She's good for you, Margaret said simply. Alexander smiled faintly. I know. You've spent so much of your life giving to others, Alex, your company, your employees, even to me. You deserve someone who gives back. Don't be afraid to let her in fully. He kissed his mother's forehead, his chest warm. Thank you, Mom. Not everyone welcomed the new chapter. At a charity gala, Vanessa reappeared, her presence as sharp as ever. She spotted Alexander and Tracy together, Tracy dressed elegantly but modestly at his side. Well, well, Vanessa sneered loud enough for others to hear. So this is the replacement? A nurse? How quaint. I suppose every billionaire needs his charity project. Gasps rippled through the small circle. Tracy flushed, embarrassed. lowering her gaze. But Alexander's expression turned cold, his voice steady and commanding. "Enough, Vanessa." He took Tracy's hand firmly, holding it up for all to see. "This woman is no project. She is my partner, my equal, and the one I love. And if you or anyone else cannot respect her, then you don't deserve a place in our lives." The room fell silent. Vanessa sputtered, then stormed away. But Alexander didn't care. All that mattered was the way Tracy's eyes softened when she looked at him. Gratitude and love mingling together. Months passed. Their bond deepened. Margaret regained her strength fully, often joking that she felt younger than she had in years. Tracy became not only a caregiver but a friend, a daughter figure, and, most importantly, a source of joy in the household. Alexander knew it was time. He prepared carefully. On a quiet evening, he invited Tracy to the rooftop of his penthouse. Fairy lights twinkled around the garden terrace, soft music played in the background, and Margaret sat nearby, smiling knowingly. When Tracy stepped out, she gasped at the sight. "Alexander, what is all this?" He walked toward her slowly, his heart pounding but sure. "It's everything I've wanted to say," he murmured. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a velvet box. Inside, the ring glimmered beneath the lights. "Tracy Bernard," he said, voice thick with emotion, "you've shown me what real love looks like. Selfless, kind, unwavering. You healed my mother, but you also healed me. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled freely down Tracy's cheeks. She covered her mouth, then nodded, her voice breaking. "Yes, Alexander, 1,000 times yes." Applause rose from Margaret, who laughed through her tears, clutching her hands in delight. Alexander slipped the ring onto Tracy's finger, then rose to kiss her gently, sealing the promise of a new life together. Their wedding day arrived months later, a perfect summer morning. The ceremony was held in the Grant family estate garden, where roses bloomed in every shade. Guests gathered beneath a white archway draped in silk, the air alive with music and joy. Tracy walked down the aisle in an elegant gown made of lace and adorned with glittery stones, her beauty radiant not from jewels, but from the glow of love. Alexander waited at the altar, his gaze fixed solely on her. Margaret sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face, her health restored, her heart overflowing. She reached for a handkerchief but laughed even through her sobs. When Alexander and Tracy exchanged vows, the words were simple but powerful. They spoke not of riches or glamour, but of faith, loyalty, and choosing each other every day. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the applause was thunderous. Alexander kissed his bride, the world falling away until there was only the two of them. Later, as they danced beneath the stars, Margaret watched from her seat, joy etched across her features. Her son was no longer alone. He had found not just a partner, but a love that had healed them both. And Alexander knew with absolute certainty that his life had finally begun. In choosing Tracy, he hadn't just found a wife, he had found the very heartbeat of home. Thank you so much for watching and supporting my channel. Your love, comments, and shares mean everything to me. Grateful for each of you. Let's keep growing together. With love from Whispers of Hope.